It began with a silence you could feel in your teeth. Wind moved through T-shaped doorways, down stone stairs, across kivas whose roofs were sealed with mud. Pots, still warmed by the last fire, sat on hearths. A child's sandal waited by a threshold. The village looked as if families had only stepped out for water. But they were gone. Gone from cliff houses wedged beneath the brow of the canyon, from towers and plazas on the mesa tops, from roads that ran arrow straight across the sage. The Four Corners country kept their rooms like open palms, and the question hardened in the air: why did they leave? Centuries later, archaeologists tried to read that silence the way sailors read weather. Tree rings kept count. Starting in 1276, the rings grew thin for nearly a quarter century. The Great Drought was not one bad season, but a grinding absence. Springs sank into rock. Cottonwoods along washes turned brittle, leaves crisped like paper. Terraced fields failed on slopes that had fed grandparents and great-grandparents. Turkeys were turned loose because there was nothing left to feed them. People pulled tighter around what water remained, and pressure built where lives overlapped. Nothing about their lives had been casual. For centuries, they coaxed a civilization from thin soils and short seasons, check dams, waffle gardens, small reservoirs. Trade ran far. Macaws and copper bells came north. Obsidian and turquoise moved in return. Roads cut straight miles across sage. In Chaco Canyon, great houses rose with hundreds of rooms and broad kivas, their walls laid in precise courses of thin stone. Light and shadow were part of the plan. Doorways and windows aligned to solstices, lines on the ground, meeting lines in the sky. It was a landscape arranged with intent. But forests did not regrow as fast as roof beams were cut. By the 13th century, wood came from farther ridges. Fields thinned as wind gnawed soil, and gullies ate into terraces. When crops failed, hunger walked through towns. People crowded near water. Crowded places grew hard. Palisades went up. Towers rose. Arrow points turned up in ash. The number of healed fractures on bones told its own story. Some villages chose the rock itself as a wall and moved beneath the cliffs. The cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde were a late answer to a tightening world. Families tucked homes beneath stone ceilings where winter sun reached in and summer sun did not, where one ladder could turn a block of rooms into a redoubt. Smoke blackened the cave roof. Corn dried on rafters. Below, narrow fields clung to the slope, planted with corn, beans, and squash. 3 plants that agreed to help each other if the rains would only keep their side of the bargain. Across the canyon, another village built a round tower near its great kiva, watch and ritual standing side by side like 2 hands of the same body. The last seasons felt like a decision, spreading house to house. People patched roofs, but did not plaster like they used to. Storage jars were pulled to the front of rooms. Kivas were filled with rubble, a deliberate closing of places that had held ceremony for generations. When a town leaves blessings behind, it means they do not plan to return. Grooved footpaths led away from canyon heads toward the Rio Grande valleys and the lands of future Zuni and Hopi towns, toward river flats, where fields did not depend on scarce upland showers. If they vanished, it was only from the addresses we visit as tourists. They did not blink out. They moved. Migration stories speak of clans traveling by signs in the sky, by springs that sang, by corn that agreed with the ground. Archaeology adds quieter evidence, painted designs repeating in new regions, kivas rebuilt beside long rectangular room blocks. It is a surname of stone, doorways, pottery, roof beams, recognizable even after miles and years. What drove the journey was the weight of many things. Drought forced hard choices on land already pushed. Fields needed rest. Wood came dear. Trade faltered. With stress came fear. Neighbors became competitors. You see it in hurried masonry and rooms burned with belongings inside, and also in solidarity as villages fused and roads tied close communities into tighter knots. People were trying everything at once: defend, adapt, endure. Chaco Canyon, the old center, had passed its peak long before the last exodus. In the 11th and 12th centuries, its great houses were aligned to solstices and sight lines, doors framing doors across courtyards. When Chaco's influence waned, regional hubs rose in places like Mesa Verde and Cayenta. The system shifted its weight, seeking stability. Then the long drought tightened, and stability cracked. Excavations at places like Sand Canyon and Castle Rock show hurried fortifications, burned rooms with pottery left in place, and burials amid collapse, evidence of raids and fear riding with scarcity. The tree ring record is a hard witness. Construction peaks in the 1200s, then annual rings thin to threads. Later roof beams came from higher, farther slopes, each ring a mile walked under load. Migration followed, but culture traveled with it. New pueblos along the Rio Grande and on the Hopi mesas carried forward the old designs and ceremonies under different skies. By the 1290s, movement replaced waiting. Imagine the last morning. Roof beams were lifted for reuse in future kivas. Women packed jars, grinding stones, mantas, and a pouch of seeds saved from the last good harvest. Children were roused before dawn and told to remember this water and this sky. A boy tucked carved gaming pieces into a bag, hesitated, then followed the line out. Downriver, new plazas took shape. Rectangular room blocks framed squares meant for work and dance. Kivas were set flush with the ground or half submerged. Fields spread on broader flats, where irrigation made more sense than terrace walls. Pottery styles shifted with new clays and water, but certain lines persisted like a voice through time. Rituals learned in the north found new homes. Life continued. Work, marriage, grief, celebration. The memory of the old places lived in prayers said before planting and in designs that still turned up on bowls passed from hand to hand. Archaeologists still debate the balance of the forces that pushed these migrations. Some point to tree rings and climate, others to resource exhaustion, others to conflict. The truth likely braided all three. What is not debated is continuity. Descendants of those who built Mesa Verde and Chaco live today in the pueblos of the Southwest. Their histories describe origin places, migrations, and returns. Their languages hold the names of springs and ridgelines we now read on maps. When they tell the story, it is a road, not a disappearance. Elders today still tell migration histories that cross the same canyons we walk as tourists. Songs name springs and ridgelines in order, as if they were lines on a map folded into memory. In plaza dances, the stepped cloud and spiral return in cloth and paint. Corn still anchors the calendar. To call it disappearance is to miss that the story kept going under new roofs, in languages and ceremonies that never went quiet. Stand beneath a cliff house at dusk, and you can feel why the word vanishing survives. The rooms are clean, corners square, plaster smooth, doors sealed. But the silence is not a mystery. It is a pause between chapters. Wind combs soot on the overhang. A raven cuts the canyon and folds its wings like a closing hand. If you listen long enough, you might hear something that is not the past at all, a distant drum from a village that never left, only moved. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.